One of the easiest places to stop trusting yourself is inside a relationship you really care about. Because maybe something happens and it bothers you. Maybe their tone feels different. Maybe something they said doesn't sit right. Maybe you leave a conversation feeling hurt or confused or just a little off. And for a moment, you know something affected you, but then your mind starts going all over the place. You might think, am I overreacting? Maybe I'm just insecure. Maybe this isn't even a big deal. What if I bring it up and make things worse? What if I'm wrong? And before you've even had time to understand what you're feeling, you're already trying to talk yourself out of it. And I think this is where self trust starts to matter. Not because every feeling you have is automatically right, not because every thought you have should be believed, but because something can affect you without you immediately having to dismiss it. You can listen to yourself before deciding what it means. And I think sometimes we misunderstand what trusting yourself actually means. We think it means trust your gut. If something feels wrong, then it must be wrong. Always believe your feelings. But I don't think it's that simple. Because sometimes your feelings are responding to what's happening right now. And sometimes they're reacting to something you've been through before. Sometimes you notice something important, and sometimes fear fills in the blanks. Sometimes another person really is being inconsistent, and sometimes you misunderstand the situation. So, trusting yourself can't mean whatever I feel must be true, because the opposite isn't healthy either. Because every time you feel something and you tell yourself, I'm probably being dramatic, I'm probably too sensitive, it's probably just anxiety, then you're not really trusting yourself. You're just dismissing yourself faster. But I think the middle ground sounds more like something in me is reacting right now. I don't fully know why yet, but I'm willing to pay attention to it. That's very different. Because sometimes self trust is simply giving yourself permission to say, I don't know what this means yet, but I'm not going to ignore it. For example, imagine someone you're dating becomes a little quieter than usual. Their replies are shorter, they take longer to text back, and you notice yourself getting anxious. Now, maybe your first thought is they're losing interest, something is wrong, they're pulling away, and suddenly you've gone from feeling anxious to believing you know what's happening. But maybe you go the other direction. You tell yourself, stop being needy, they're probably just busy, don't ruin this. Now, you're not assuming the worst, but you're also not really listening to yourself either. There's another option. You can just notice, okay, I feel anxious right now. That's it. You don't have to decide what it means. You don't have to text them again. You don't have to convince yourself that nothing is wrong either. You just notice it. And maybe you give yourself a little time. Maybe you keep living your day. Maybe you see what happens next. Maybe later you ask a question. That's self trust too. Not knowing right away, but trusting yourself enough not to force an answer. And I think this is one of the biggest differences between self trust and certainty. Because certainty says, I need to know exactly what this means. But self trust says, I can handle not knowing it. That's a much calmer place to live from. Because relationships are full of things you probably won't understand immediately. Someone may seem distant and it has nothing to do with you. Someone may be upset, but they're not ready to explain it yet. You may feel hurt and not know why until later. You may think something means one thing and then realize after talking about it that it meant something completely different. All those things can be normal. You don't have to solve every feeling the moment it appears. Sometimes you just need enough space to let reality give you more information. But then maybe you're wondering, okay, but what if something really is wrong? Then you pay attention, you look at the pattern, not just one moment, but the pattern. Do their words match their actions? Do they communicate when things are difficult? Do they repair when something goes wrong? Do you generally feel like you can be honest with them? Or do you keep feeling confused, small, afraid to speak, or unsure where you stand? One moment can affect you, but patterns tell you much more. And trusting yourself means allowing yourself to notice both. You don't have to let one bad night erase 6 months of consistency. And you also don't have to let 6 good moments convince you to ignore a pattern that keeps hurting you. That's where discernment comes in. And I think that's part of the reason why self trust takes time. Sometimes you genuinely don't have enough information yet. And instead of forcing yourself to decide, you let the relationship keep showing you what it is. And sometimes self trust looks like speaking up before you fully understand everything. You don't need to have a perfect explanation. You don't need to know exactly what the problem is. You can just say, hey, something about earlier has been sitting with me. I'm not completely sure what it is yet, but I felt different afterward, and I'd like to talk about it. That's honest. You're not accusing them. You're not saying you did this to me, but you're also not pretending that nothing happened. You're bringing your experience into the relationship and giving both of you a chance to understand it. That's a healthy kind of self trust. And this part matters too. Sometimes you bring something up and you realize you were wrong. Maybe you misunderstood them. Maybe you assumed something they never said. Maybe fear got ahead of reality. And if that happens, it doesn't mean you should stop trusting yourself. It might actually mean the opposite. Because self trust doesn't mean I'm always right. It means I can trust myself enough to keep looking honestly, even when what I find is uncomfortable. You can say, I think I got that wrong. I'm sorry. I understand it differently now, and still trust yourself. Because trusting yourself isn't about protecting your ego, it's about staying honest. For example, maybe you and your partner go somewhere together, and throughout the night, they seem distant. They're talking to everyone else, but you barely feel connected to them. And afterward, you feel hurt. Maybe your first thought is, they were embarrassed to be with me. Now, maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. You don't know yet. But instead of accusing them or pretending that you weren't hurt, you say something like, hey, I felt pretty disconnected from you tonight. Part of me started wondering if you didn't really want me to be there. I don't know if that's what was happening, but can we talk about it? And maybe they say, no, I had no idea you felt that way. I was just catching up with some people. Now you have more information. Maybe your interpretation changes, but maybe they also understand your experience better as well. Maybe they say, I can see why it felt that way for you. I'll check in with you more next time. And maybe you say, and I'll tell you sooner if I start feeling disconnected instead of letting it build. That's not one person being right and one person being wrong. That's two people learning more about each other. And honestly, that's what healthy intimacy looks like a lot of the time. I also think your body can give you information without giving you the whole answer. Maybe you feel tightness before saying it's fine. Maybe your stomach drops when you agree to something you don't really want to. Maybe you feel yourself wanting to speak and then you see the reaction and change your answer. Those moments don't automatically mean this relationship is unhealthy, but they may be worth noticing. Maybe ask, what was I about to say before I changed it? What am I afraid will happen if I'm honest? Do I actually want this? Sometimes the answer will be obvious, sometimes it won't. You don't have to force it. The point is simply not throwing away your own experience. And if you're someone who overthinks everything, this doesn't mean you need to analyze every feeling for 3 hours. That can become another problem in itself. Self-trust isn't endless self-analysis. Sometimes you notice something, you think about it enough, you communicate, and then you move on with your life. Because eventually you have to let reality teach you. You can't think your way into complete certainty about another person. Sometimes you have to have the conversation. Sometimes you have to wait. Sometimes you have to watch the pattern. Sometimes you have to admit you were wrong. And sometimes you have to accept what their behavior keeps showing you. Self-trust is not just thinking, it's knowing whatever I find out, I can respond to it. So the next time something happens in a relationship, maybe don't immediately ask, am I right? Try asking, what am I actually feeling? What do I know? What am I assuming? Do I need more information? Is this one moment or is this becoming a pattern? And most importantly, can I stay connected to myself even if the answer isn't what I want? Because think about it. If I only trust what I'm feeling when you agree with me, if I only trust my boundaries when you like them, if I only trust my needs when they're convenient for you, then in some way I'm still asking you to tell me whether my own experience is allowed to matter. But grounded self-trust says, this is what I'm experiencing. I may not have the full picture yet, but I'm willing to hear you, and I'm not going to abandon myself while I do. That's different. And maybe that's what trusting yourself in a relationship really becomes. Not always knowing everything that might happen, not never getting triggered, not having perfect intuition, not being right all the time, but it's just knowing if something hurts, I'll listen. If I'm confused, I'll slow down. If I'm wrong, I'll own it. If something keeps hurting me, I'll pay attention to it and communicate it. If I need something, I'll let myself know that I need it. And if loving someone starts requiring me to keep leaving myself behind, I'll notice that too. You might still make mistakes. You probably will. You might trust someone who hurts you. You might misunderstand someone you love. You might stay longer than you should. You might walk away from something that later you wish you handled it differently. That's part of being human. Self-trust was never a guarantee that love wouldn't hurt. Maybe the deeper security is simply knowing that whatever happens in a relationship, you'll keep coming back to yourself. You'll listen, you'll stay curious, you'll ask questions, you'll own what belongs to you, you'll pay attention to what reality keeps showing you. And when something genuinely matters, you won't keep silencing yourself just to keep the relationship comfortable. Because trusting yourself in love, it doesn't mean knowing that the person you love will never leave. It means knowing that you won't disappear from your own life trying to keep them in it. And I think that's what allows two people to really meet each other. Not two perfect people, not two people who always agree with each other and everything. Just two people who can remain themselves while learning how to understand, repair, and love each other well.